Some of the most popular investments sold to beginning investors in Europe are really bad. If you use these investments, you can cut your lifetime profits in half, or even worse. When I moved to Europe after my career on Wall Street, this really surprised me. So in this video, I will show you exactly what these rip-off investments are, how to avoid them, and what I would choose instead. To understand the first rip-off investment, imagine this. You want to buy this car for 10,000 euros. You also want to buy this bike for 1,000 euros for a combined cost of 11,000 euros. Well, what if I make you an offer? I'm going to save you time and effort. You can buy both the car and the bike in a single purchase for 15,000 euros. Would you do that? Of course not. That's ridiculous, right? Who would overpay by 4,000 euros? But that is exactly what happens when you buy one of the most popular investments in Europe, unit-linked insurance, also called investment-linked insurance. This is a financial package that combines a life insurance contract with an investment fund. Separately, each of these products can be useful. Life insurance protects your family in case something happens to you. Investment funds grow your wealth. But when you combine them, what you get is some kind of Frankensteinian monster of huge fees and poor results. The thing is, unit-linked insurance is hard to understand. When you combine two very different financial products, it is difficult even for professionals to separate the parts and calculate a fair price for the product. Now, to us investors, this looks like a problem, but to insurance companies, it's actually a feature, because it enables them to quietly charge you very high fees. And I mean very, very high fees. Let me give you some context. The best investment funds in Europe, which we will talk about in a minute, have fees as low as 0.1 to 0.2% per year. Mediocre investment funds, like most of the funds sold by your local European bank, charge around 5 to 10 times more, maybe 1 to 2% per year, which is not good at all. But unit-linked insurance is much, much worse, because typically it takes these expensive, mediocre investment funds and sticks them inside an insurance wrapper, which adds another layer of costs on top. A February 2025 report from the Central Bank of Italy found that unit-linked insurance adds between 0.5% to 2.5% per year in extra costs compared to investing directly in the underlying funds. This is enough to make a mediocre investment into a total ripoff. If you look at the 2023 Costs and Past Performance Report prepared by the European Insurance and Occupational Pensions Authority, average unit-linked insurance costs across the European Economic Area were 2.3% per year. But in many markets, this was worse. The average for Belgium was 2.7% per year, 2.8% per year for Italy, 3% per year for France, and a whopping 3.8% per year for Slovenia. And what is worse, these are just averages. Many people end up paying more. Just look at this contract from my home country, Latvia. It costs you 4 to 5% per year if you withdraw your money after 10 years, and a ridiculous 8 to 9% per year if you withdraw your money earlier, after 5 years. I cannot overstate just how bad this is. As Jack Bogle said, in investing, you get what you don't pay for. The more you pay in fees, the lower your expected result. Let's say that your unit-linked insurance invests in the global stock market. The historical average return of developed world stocks has been 9% per year. If you reduce that for inflation, you get maybe 5% per year in real returns. But if you're going to be paying 4 to 5% per year or more in fees to your insurance company, then your real expected profit is around zero. You're taking a whole bunch of investment risk, while the insurance company gets all the profit. To me, these expensive insurance contracts are a legalized ripoff, and everybody who sells this crap should be ashamed of themselves. In a few minutes, I will show you the only reliable method that I know to discover the true costs of your life insurance contract so that you don't fall for this. Now, is unit-linked insurance always bad? Of course not. In many European countries, unit-linked insurance has some tax advantages, and there are a few companies offering relatively low-cost products out there. Unit-linked insurance can also be helpful if you have a complicated inheritance situation. With these contracts, you can usually indicate a beneficiary. If anything happens to you while the contract is active, they will get the money directly without going through the usual inheritance process. So that can be helpful, but my point is this: you should be very careful before buying these products. Make sure you understand the investment strategy and definitely check the costs so that you don't overpay. Let's move on to rip-off investment number 2. To explain this one, let me go back to when I was a new banker on Wall Street. I got a toothache, so for the first time in my life, I went to see an American dentist. I go to this fancy office. Everything looks amazing. They do this cool 3D scan of my whole jaw. And then the dentist comes in looking really concerned. He says, "Look, I hate to tell you, but you've got problems. You need 4 crowns and 5 fillings." I thought, man, that sucks. But I guess with all this technology, the doctor knows best, right? So I allowed the dentist to do all this work on my teeth, and I paid around $10,000 even with insurance. Then I went back home and saw my dentist in Latvia who checked my teeth again. And he said, well, actually, the majority of that work, it was completely unnecessary. Your teeth are fine. They just needed an excuse to get your money. At first, I thought he couldn't possibly be right, but I did some reading about this, and it turns out with American dentists, this happens all the time. And that's ridiculous, right? I mean, it made me furious. Now, thankfully, here in Europe, I've never encountered this kind of scam with any doctor, but the same thing happens every day with investments. When you ask your local bank, your friendly neighborhood bank, for investment advice, chances are they won't give you the best advice for your interests. They will not offer you low-cost, proven investments like index funds or ETFs, which are recommended by most experts. They will sell you whatever product makes the bank the most money. And these are typically expensive investment funds managed by the bank itself or some affiliated fund manager. Look, this is not up for debate. Expensive, actively managed funds are a bad investment. This is for 2 reasons. First, actively managed funds are not great whether they are cheap or not. According to the Morningstar Active Passive Barometer mid-year 2025, over the past 10 years in the US stock market, only 15% of even the cheapest actively managed funds managed to beat the results of a simple index fund. But the problem is, high fees make all of this even worse. If you look at the same 10 years of data, but only consider the most expensive funds, then only 4% of them managed to beat a low-cost index fund. If your bank truly had your best interest at heart, they would recommend low-cost ETFs and index funds. They would steer you away from high-fee active funds. But in most cases, banks here in Europe will do the exact opposite. They will only talk about index funds or ETFs if you specifically ask them. According to the 2025 Fact Book of the European Fund and Asset Management Association, the average total expense ratio for long-term actively managed funds here in Europe was 1% per year, compared to 0.2% per year for the average index fund or ETF. So this is a very significant 0.8% per year difference. Just to give you an idea, if you invest 200 euros a month for 40 years and earn an average profit of 9% per year minus a 0.2% fee, you will end up with 800,000 euros. But if you pay 1% in fees, like with an active fund, your final balance would be around 647,000 euros. That's a lot less. And unfortunately, in many cases, the fees that you pay are even higher. If you were to pay 2% per year, your final balance would be only 496,000 euros. That's almost 40% less. So don't fall for this second ripoff. Don't buy the expensive, actively managed funds recommended by your bank. Now, part of the problem is that both with investment funds and with unit-linked insurance, it can be hard to discover the true fees that you're being charged. Sometimes the person selling you the product will conveniently forget to explain the fees at all, or they might only mention part of the fees. And what is worse, in many cases, the salesperson doesn't even understand the fees involved. They might sincerely believe they are handing you a wonderful investment, when in reality, they're handing you a pile of manure. I know only one reliable way to check investment fees for these products, and that is to ask for the Key Information Document. The Key Information Document, or KID, is a standardized document which reveals basic facts about an investment's strategy, risks, and costs. Here in the European Union, financial companies are required to provide you with a KID for every investment fund or unit-linked insurance that they offer. So let me quickly demonstrate how to find and read this document. Let's say you've discovered the website of an investment fund, in this case an ETF. So the most popular ETF in Europe, the iShares Core S&P 500 UCITS ETF. Somewhere on the page you will always find a button or a link that says KID, Key Information Document. So you click on that and open up this document. A key information document actually has quite a lot of different information. It tells you about the purpose of the investment, what is in the product, what is the risk level. Certainly study all of this. But for me, the most important part is on page 3, here at the top, where you have this section, what are the costs? And specifically, this first table shows you the annual cost impact. By how much is your investment profit going to be reduced every year because of costs? So for example, for this ETF, we see that if you exit the investment after 1 year, the cost impact will be 0.1% per year. And if you exit after 5 years, it's the same. It's also 0.1% per year. In the case of unit-linked insurance, the cost impact is usually much higher if you take your money out early as opposed to later. For example, for this unit-linked insurance, if you surrender after 1 year, you actually lose as much as 36% of your money, as opposed to 2.7% to 4.3% per year if you exit after 15 years. This is because unit-linked insurance often has some heavy upfront costs. So always check the key information document before buying any investment fund or unit-linked insurance. Now let's move on to rip-off number 3. 10 years ago, I got really upset by a problem in my home country, Latvia. At the time, Latvia was one of the poorest countries in the European Union, but Latvians who wanted to buy pension funds and invest for retirement were forced to pay the highest fees among developed countries. Our pension funds cost 1.5% per year on average. Now, fortunately, in the case of Latvia, the problem was solved. I actually got together with some partners and we built a company called Indexo. We offered pension funds with 50% lower fees. We basically started a price war and totally revolutionized the local market. But unfortunately, in many European countries, pension fees remain a big problem. If you pay 1 or 2% per year to your pension fund in fees, that will end up costing you tens or even hundreds of thousands of euros in lost profits by the time you retire. And this is money you can definitely use better in your old age. Now, I'm a huge supporter of pension investing. Government pensions here in Europe are small, and they're not getting bigger. If you want to have a nice retirement, you need to invest for your pension. Plus, most countries actually offer you tax benefits when you buy pension funds. But this kind of investment only makes sense if you're using a pension fund with low fees. Let's say under 1% per year, or ideally even much less. Unfortunately, key information documents are typically not available for pension funds, and that means understanding the true costs of your investment can be difficult. Your best bet is to ask your pension provider to give you a full list of all fees and then to study them carefully. Also, make sure that your pension fund invests in a strategy that matches your age. If you're 40 years old, but your pension fund holds mostly low-risk investments like bonds, you might be in trouble. The investment profits will probably not be enough to build you good savings for retirement. Now, there is some good news. In many European countries today, you can actually build a pretty amazing pension portfolio by putting ETFs or index funds inside a tax-advantaged wrapper. For example, you can buy ETFs inside your ISA or SIP account in the UK, your PRSA account in Ireland, or your PEA account in France. Many other European countries have similar solutions. This combines a proven low-cost investment with tax advantages. So the next time some salesperson offers you an expensive investment ripoff, remember that you can skip the high fees and build a better portfolio on your own using index funds or ETFs. Of course, the first time you try this, you will have a lot of questions, like what is the best ETF to use in your individual case? Which brokerage or investment app should you use? And how do you handle taxes? Well, to find out the answer to those questions, click the first link in the description and watch a video that I put together on this topic.